Thanksgiving morning always carried a certain warmth in our home. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifting from the kitchen, soft golden sunlight spilling through the curtains, and the distant sound of my mother humming while she prepared food. Those were the memories I grew up with, but that year, something felt off the moment I stepped through the front door. The house was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that feels like something has already happened and you are just late to the truth. I placed my bag down slowly and looked around. The dining room was already set. Plates were aligned perfectly, silverware polished, glasses arranged like a formal event. Guests were expected soon, but my mother was not sitting at the table like she always did. Instead, she was in the kitchen, wearing an old apron I didn't recognize, standing near the stove like she didn't belong in her own home. "Mom," I called out, walking toward her. She turned slightly. Her expression didn't match the usual calm confidence she carried during holidays. There was hesitation in her eyes, something uncertain, almost lost. "I'm almost done," she said softly, but her voice didn't sound like she was talking about cooking. It sounded like she was trying to convince herself of something. Before I could ask anything else, I heard footsteps behind me. My aunt entered first, followed by two other relatives. They weren't smiling the way they usually did. Instead, they looked too formal, like they were attending a business meeting rather than a family holiday. And then I saw it, on the dining table, a thick folded document placed neatly at the center. My uncle tapped it lightly with his fingers. "We should get this out of the way before dinner starts." My mother froze the moment she saw it. Her hand, which was holding a spoon, paused midair. "What is that?" I asked immediately. My aunt sighed as if I was the one being difficult. "It's the agreement. Your mother already signed it." I stepped closer to the table. The words on the page made no sense at first, but as I read further, my stomach tightened. It claimed my mother had voluntarily agreed to provide domestic service as a live-in housemaid during family gatherings. Cooking, cleaning, serving guests, everything, in exchange for a payment that looked strangely generous. My mother shook her head instantly. "I never signed this." Her voice was firmer now, but there was confusion behind it. Not just denials, but disbelief, like she was trying to recall something that wasn't coming back clearly. My aunt didn't even look at her. "It has your signature." "That's not possible," Mom said, stepping closer. But my uncle pushed the paper slightly toward me. "Look for yourself." I did, and that's when I noticed something wrong. The signature looked like hers, but it wasn't right. The curves were too stiff. The rhythm of her handwriting was off. I had seen my mother sign countless school forms, bank documents, even my own papers when I was younger. I knew her handwriting like I knew her voice. This wasn't it, but no one else seemed to care. "It's valid," my aunt said flatly. "We already confirmed it." My mother looked at me now, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. "I didn't agree to this," she repeated again, quieter this time. But the room didn't respond. Instead, the atmosphere shifted, like the decision had already been made without her. And that was the moment I realized something disturbing. They weren't asking for the truth. They were enforcing a lie. The guests began arriving shortly after that. Laughter filled the house again, plates clinking, conversations starting. But something about it felt staged. Every time my mother walked into the room, carrying trays or refilling glasses, the laughter softened. Eyes followed her movements too closely, whispers happened too quickly. "Serve the drinks first," my aunt instructed casually. Mom hesitated for a fraction of a second, then she obeyed. I watched her carefully. Something in her posture had changed. She wasn't angry. She wasn't resisting. She looked unsure of herself, like she was beginning to doubt her own memory. That scared me more than anything, because my mother was not someone who forgot things like this. As she passed me with a tray of drinks, she leaned slightly toward me and whispered, barely audible, "I don't understand this." Her hand trembled slightly. I would never agree to something like this. I wanted to stop everything right there, but before I could speak, my uncle called her back into the kitchen. "More plates," he said firmly, and she went, just like that. No argument, no refusal. Something inside me tightened painfully as I watched her disappear behind the kitchen door again. The sound of laughter continued in the dining room, but it felt distant now, like I was hearing it from another world. I looked back at the contract on the table, and for the first time I felt it clearly. This wasn't paperwork. It was control, and somehow my mother had been placed under it without even knowing how. I didn't know it yet, but that Thanksgiving dinner wasn't going to be about food. It was going to be about the truth someone had tried very hard to bury. By the time the house filled with guests, it no longer felt like Thanksgiving. It felt like a staged performance where everyone, except my mother, knew their role. The smell of roasted turkey and spiced gravy floated through the air, but it couldn't hide the tension underneath it all. Every laugh sounded slightly forced. Every conversation felt carefully controlled, like people were avoiding something they all understood but refused to name. And in the middle of it all was my mother, moving quietly between rooms, serving not as a host, not as a family member, but as if she had been placed there for one purpose only: water. My uncle said without even looking at her. My mother immediately picked up the pitcher and moved toward him. "Not that glass, the other one," my aunt added sharply, as if correcting a mistake in a restaurant order. She changed direction. I watched her hands tighten slightly around the tray. She didn't argue. She didn't protest. But I could see something breaking slowly inside her composure, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet erosion of dignity. Each step she took around the dining table felt heavier than the last. I noticed how some guests avoided eye contact with her entirely, while others looked at her with faint amusement, like they were observing a situation they had been instructed not to question. It wasn't open cruelty, it was something worse, permissioned disrespect, and that contract sat on the table like a silent authority no one dared to challenge. Except me, I kept glancing at it between bites I couldn't even taste. The paper felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain yet. My mother's signature still haunted my thoughts. I had seen her write too many times to accept that it was real. But what disturbed me more was her behavior. She wasn't just serving. She was hesitating. Small pauses between actions. A brief look of confusion when someone gave her instructions. Once, she stood near the hallway holding empty plates and whispered to herself, "Why am I doing this?" No one answered her. Not even the guests who heard it. That was when I realized something chilling. They weren't just using her. They were ignoring her confusion on purpose. A cousin laughed softly as my mother refilled a drink. "She's really committed to the role, huh?" My aunt smiled politely. "She understands the agreement." My mother flinched slightly at those words. "I don't," she said, her voice shaking now. "I don't understand any of this." The room went quiet for half a second. Then my uncle cleared his throat. "Let's not make this awkward during dinner." Awkward. That was the word they used for her confusion. As if her reality was an inconvenience, as if questioning her own life was inappropriate at the dinner table. My chest tightened. I stood up slightly, but my aunt's sharp glance stopped me immediately. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was just a warning: sit down, don't interfere. So I sat back down, but I stopped eating, because now I was watching everything. Every time my mother entered the room, the atmosphere shifted slightly. Not enough for others to notice, but enough for me to feel it. Conversations paused for a fraction of a second. eyes tracked her movements, then resumed as if nothing unusual was happening, like she was background noise in her own home. At one point, she stopped behind my chair, holding a tray of food. I could feel her presence before I saw her face. I don't remember agreeing to this. She whispered again, softer this time, almost pleading with the air itself. My aunt answered without even turning around, "You did." My mother looked down at her hands as if searching for proof in her own memory. "I would never agree to be treated like this." There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable pause, and then my uncle said, almost casually, "It's already signed." Something inside me shifted at that moment, not just anger, awareness, because I noticed something important. They never explained the contract. They never discussed when it was signed. They never even showed her the full document again. They just repeated it like a sentence already passed, as if repetition alone could turn lies into truth. My mother walked away slowly, tray still in her hands, but her steps were different now, heavier, less certain. Like her mind was beginning to fracture under the pressure of everyone else's certainty. I followed her gaze as she entered the kitchen again. The sound of laughter returned instantly in the dining room, but I couldn't hear it the same way anymore. Because now I saw what was happening. This wasn't just humiliation. It was psychological isolation. They were rewriting reality around her and making her doubt her own, and the worst part, it was working. Because my mother, the strongest person I knew, was starting to question herself instead of them. I looked back at the fake contract on the table, and I made a silent decision. This wasn't going to end at dinner. It was only going to begin there. That night, long after the guests left and the house finally fell into silence, I couldn't sleep. The smell of Thanksgiving food still lingered in the kitchen, but it felt different now, like residue from something unsettling rather than a celebration. My mother had gone to bed early, unusually quiet, her face tired in a way I had never seen before. Not physical exhaustion, but mental strain, like her thoughts were carrying too much weight. And I couldn't stop thinking about the contract. I sat at my desk and opened the folder I had secretly taken a photo of earlier. The document stared back at me on my screen, clean and official looking, but something about it still felt wrong. I zoomed in on the signature again, slow, careful, studied. The loops didn't flow naturally. The pressure changes weren't consistent. It looked like someone had copied it after seeing it only a few times, or worse, traced it under pressure. My mother's real signature had rhythm, confidence, familiar imperfections. This had none of that. I leaned back in my chair, heart beating faster now. It was fake, but proving it wasn't enough. I needed to understand how it happened. The next morning, I went out early without telling anyone. The first stop was the notary office listed on the document. A small, quiet place tucked between two old shops. The clerk looked at the paper I showed him and frowned immediately. "I've never seen this before," he said. I blinked, "But your stamp is on it." He shook his head. "That stamp is copied. This document was never processed here." My stomach tightened. "So someone forged it." He hesitated. "It looks like it." That was all I needed. Someone inside my family had gone out of their way to create an official-looking lie. But why, and more importantly, who? When I returned home, I noticed my aunt sitting in the living room, casually sipping tea like nothing had happened. She smiled when she saw me. "You're up early," she said. I studied her carefully now, every word, every movement. "You handled everything well yesterday," she added, handled, like it was a situation she controlled. I said nothing and walked past her. But inside, something was already shifting. Later that afternoon, I waited until my mother was in the garden and quietly checked her phone records. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but I needed answers. What I found made my suspicion worse. Weeks ago, My aunt had been calling her repeatedly, offering help with paperwork, insurance forms, tax documents, family-related legal updates, and then it clicked. The helpful visits, the documents she was asked to sign quickly, the distraction, they hadn't forged her signature in one step. They had built it slowly, piece by piece. I felt sick because I realized my mother hadn't signed a contract. She had been guided into giving away trust until it was used against her. That evening, I sat beside her in the kitchen while she chopped vegetables quietly. "Mom," I said carefully, "do you remember signing anything with Aunt recently?" She paused. Her knife stopped midair. I remember signing papers," she said slowly, "but I thought they were insurance documents." Her voice tightened. She said it was routine. My fists clenched under the table. She continued quietly, "I didn't read everything." She said it wasn't important. That was it. That was how it happened, not force, not violence, just trust exploited. I took a breath. That contract you saw yesterday, it wasn't real. My mother looked at me sharply now. "What do you mean?" I checked it. "It's forged." Silence. For a moment she didn't react, like her mind was trying to process something too heavy to accept all at once. Then she whispered, "So I'm not a maid." The way she said it broke something inside me. "No," I said firmly. "You are not." Her eyes filled slightly, but she didn't cry. Instead, she looked confused, almost shaken. Then why did they all act like I was? I didn't have a simple answer, because the truth was worse than she thought. "They wanted you to believe it," I said quietly. Her hands trembled slightly on the counter. "I thought I was losing my memory," she admitted. That hit me harder than anything else. They didn't just humiliate her, they destabilized her sense of reality. And that realization changed everything for me. Because now, this wasn't just about exposing a fake document. It was about restoring her truth. That night, after she went to bed, I made a decision. I collected everything. Phone records, copies of the fake contract, notary confirmation, messages, dates, and I built something my aunt wouldn't expect. Not anger, not confrontation, but proof. Solid, undeniable proof, because I realized something important. They had relied on confusion to control her. So I would use clarity to take that control away. And when the time came to speak, no one would be able to rewrite the truth again. 2 weeks passed after Thanksgiving, but the house never fully returned to normal. My mother moved differently now, slower, more thoughtful, like she was still trying to piece together parts of herself that had been shaken apart. She never spoke again about the contract, unless I brought it up first, and even then, her voice carried a quiet disbelief, as if the memory itself embarrassed her. But I was done letting it stay buried. Everything I had collected sat inside a single black folder on my desk. Printed messages, phone records, the notary's written statement, and most importantly, the analysis proving the signature had been forged through manipulation and staged documentation. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a weapon made of truth. And my aunt had no idea it existed. When I called the family for another dinner, they all accepted quickly. Too quickly. That alone told me everything I needed to know. They believed the story had ended. They believed my mother had already been reduced, already controlled, already settled. They were comfortable again. That comfort was exactly what I intended to break. This time, the house looked the same on the surface. Same table, same plates, same polite holiday lighting, but the atmosphere felt different to me, heavier. Like something unseen was waiting under the surface, ready to rise. My mother noticed too. "You're quiet today," she said softly as she set down a dish. "I'm just thinking," I replied. She studied my face for a moment but didn't press further. Something in her seemed more alert now, less confused than before, but still cautious, like she had learned not to trust certainty too quickly. Guests began arriving again. My aunt entered last, smiling like nothing had ever happened. She even greeted my mother casually. "Glad you're feeling better," she said. My mother didn't respond immediately. Then, quietly, she said, "I never stopped feeling fine." A pause, a small shift in the air, but my aunt simply laughed it off, of course. And that's when I knew it was time. We all sat at the table. The same table where everything had first fallen apart. My aunt sat comfortably, my uncle beside her. Other relatives scattered around like witnesses who had already decided what the truth was. I stood up slowly. The room quieted without me asking for it. "I want to talk about something," I said. My aunt smiled faintly. "Is this necessary right now?" "Yes," I said. I placed the black folder on the table. My uncle glanced at it. "What is that?" "Proof," I replied. The word made my aunt's expression shift slightly, but only for a second. I opened the folder and began. I showed the notary statement first, the denial of ever issuing or approving the contract. Then I laid out the digital trail of messages. My aunt's repeated insistence on helping. My mother signed paperwork she never fully read. Then the handwriting analysis, comparing the forged signature to my mother's authentic documents. The room didn't speak. For the first time, no one interrupted. My aunt leaned forward slightly. "This doesn't prove anything," she said calmly, but her voice had lost its softness. "It proves everything," I replied. Then I turned toward my mother. "Tell them what you remember." Silence fell again. My mother hesitated. Her hands tightened together. I could see the old confusion trying to surface again, but this time she fought it. "I remember being told it was insurance paperwork," she said slowly. I remember trusting her. Her gaze shifted to my aunt now. "But I don't remember agreeing to become someone's servant." That word hit the room harder than anything else. Servant, not maid, not helper, servant. My aunt's smile disappeared completely. "That's ridiculous," she said sharply. "You're twisting things." But this time, no one backed her up immediately because the evidence was sitting in front of them. And it was undeniable. My uncle finally spoke. "Even if there were mistakes, this is a family matter." I looked at him. "No," I said quietly. "It became a family matter the moment she was humiliated in her own home." My aunt stood up abruptly. "You think this is some kind of courtroom?" I slid one final paper onto the table, a filed legal complaint, her name printed clearly at the top. "This already is," I said. The silence that followed wasn't shock anymore. It was realization. For the first time, she understood she wasn't controlling the situation. My mother stood beside me now, not behind anyone, not serving anyone, just standing. Present, acknowledged, and that alone changed everything. My aunt's voice cracked slightly. "You're destroying this family over a misunderstanding." I shook my head. "No," I said. "You tried to destroy her reality over a lie." No one spoke after that, not because they had nothing to say, but because truth had finally taken up space in the room. My aunt slowly sat back down, her confidence gone. My uncle avoided eye contact. The rest of the table no longer looked at my mother like she was background noise. They were seeing her now, finally, and that was the real revenge, not humiliation, not shouting, not chaos, but exposure. My mother didn't smile immediately. She just breathed, slowly, deeply, like she had been holding her breath for weeks without realizing it. Then she whispered, "So it wasn't me." I shook my head. "No, Mom," I said softly. "It was never you." Her eyes finally softened. And for the first time since that Thanksgiving dinner, she didn't look confused. She looked free,